Hey everybody, welcome back to Seller Performance Solutions, our wonderful podcast here at e-commerce. I'm Chris. I'm here with Vincenzo of eComC today because, drum roll, he will be one of our lightning talk speakers at our event, our Seller Velocity event, which we'll be announcing very, very soon, June 4th in Lyon, France. And we'll have all the details on that with this video, with this week's podcast, but I want to focus more on what you're going to be talking about in France, which of course is the impact of tariffs on brand sales in the US, and a hot topic right now, all the people who want to expand into UK, into Europe, if you're already selling in those regions, how you can sell more because you're trying to mitigate the effects of tariffs. So let's just start with, where do you begin those conversations, or is everyone asking you, what are the top two things I need to do to start the process of selling more in UK and in Europe?
Yeah, so first of all, Chris, as usual, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm also super excited for what we're gonna be doing soon here in London, then in France as well. So really looking forward to that, and for everybody, just stay tuned for more information on those two events. But yeah, to answer your question, I think Europe is a conversation that's becoming very interesting for the last couple of weeks because with everything going on in the United States with the tariffs, people is really been looking for ways to diversify the sources of revenue, right? Like a lot of people rely 100% in the United States when it comes to selling
Yeah.
on Amazon, and now they're encountering themselves with 145% tariff on top of what they were essentially paying on the cost of goods, which for a lot of brands, they just don't have the cash flow to keep sustaining that level of extra expense. I mean, let's be honest, most Amazon sellers were already struggling. Now, on top of that, this tariffs is destroying a lot of brands. And Europe has been a good avenue to at least ride the wave because what we find with Europe, and then of course we can go more in depth as we progress throughout this episode, it's giving us a second opportunity to essentially succeed when it comes to selling on Amazon because of how rapid the market is growing. You have so many countries where you can really, in some of them, become pretty much the owner of mini blue oceans. You can really differentiate yourself with localization. And I'm going to be talking about some of the things you have to consider, which countries to go for first, and why do I think Europe is definitely the next thing when it comes to making sure you can scale your business over on Amazon 2025? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you think sellers in those regions that have had a pretty good ride so far are aware or prepared for all these new sellers to come in from the US or from Asia? Because I agree
Yeah.
with you. I think there's a lot of opportunity for sellers here, sellers in China, sellers everywhere to pile into Europe right now in ways that they never did before. So our,
Yeah.
let's say, German sellers who are dominating the Germany market, do you think they're ready for this kind of influx?
Yeah, I think that's actually funny that you mentioned that because we have a lot of clients in the UK and Germany, and we're just having the conversation that lately, for the last couple of weeks, they suddenly noticed new competitors coming to the play with thousands of reviews. And when we did further research in some of these competitors, these are people that are coming from the US, right? And
Yep.
that's something that's definitely going to impact Amazon sellers in Europe because what you have to consider is that a lot of these listings are going to be brought from the US to Europe. These are sometimes category leaders in the US that they're gonna come with thousands of reviews and a good reputation already, and they're gonna enter a market such as the Spanish or the Italian, the French, or even the UK and the German with a position that's gonna essentially make them leaders in a couple of months if they do everything properly in terms of localization, launching, pricing, and all of that. Because let's be honest, reviews are king on Amazon, and if
Mm-hmm.
you know the best seller right now in Germany, let's say for a yoga mat is 200 reviews, and then you come with 5,000 reviews, which product they're gonna buy. Definitely a no-brainer. So we're already starting to see that. But at the same time, I think the good thing that Europe is experiencing is that there's obstacles when it comes to entering Europe in the sense that the market is growing, but at the same time, you need to figure out as a seller how to navigate the VAT side of things, the logistics, the compliance, the packaging. So it's definitely an opportunity that is going to allow a lot of brands to diversify, but at the same time, a lot of people is not going to have the courage or the resilience to actually make it into Europe. So at the same time, this is a huge opportunity because we all know with big filters like this, the only thing that creates is a void on certain categories that you can come in and essentially dominate, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I understand historically people were afraid to get into VAT registration. They were afraid
Yeah.
to get into regulatory restrictions in continental Europe. I mean, especially countries like Germany and so forth. But now, because of tariffs, they're motivated to dive into this stuff. And I mean, when we have the event in Lyon in June, we'll be talking to sellers who are based in Europe who are looking to counter these new sellers coming into their market. And there are ways for them to do it. It's not like they'll be overrun very quickly.
Yeah,
And
for
there's
sure.
nothing they can do about it. They are experts in their category.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's something I would like to start bringing the conversation towards is like something that was definitely the case when it comes to Europe expansion a couple of years back is that you didn't have as much access to information as you do right now. And
Yeah.
sometimes what I mean with this point is that you just want ChatGPT prompt to figure out how to do sometimes expansion to some of these countries because before you had to do so much research in terms of figuring out certain things around specific processes into the compliance of things, packaging and all of that. Now a lot of the things that even ourselves that it comes to when it comes to Europe expansion, I mean, using AI has been a huge advantage for us, and now we're able to move sometimes 3 times at the speed of what we used to move when it comes to Europe expansion. So what I'm trying to say, don't get overwhelmed by all the things you have to do in terms of documentation and here and there, because the information is out there. There's a ton of tools, there's a ton of experts. It's all a matter of taking the action, and of course, before doing all that, it's making sure that the product is a good fit, which then we can talk a little bit more about how to figure that out before doing the jump.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure we'll do a lot of hands-on discussion of that during the networking sessions at the event and at your meetup in London next month. But also, what categories? I mean, do you start reaching out to certain types of brands? What categories do you think will be the best or the
Yeah.
most popular ones for foreign sellers to get into?
So the categories that definitely leading the European market as of now is the supplement space, the sport categories, and anything that has to do with home and kitchen. And then we have baby toys and so on. So those are the
Mm.
main categories we definitely experience growth. Especially the one that has significant growth, which is very interesting, is specifically in the sports and home and kitchen. Those are the ones we see in rapid growth. So if you are one of those categories, based on the research we've been doing and the brands we're launching, the search volume
Mhm.
and everything's having a huge momentum. And then on the other side, it's going back to things such as supplements and anything that's a bit more tricky when it comes to the compliance. Definitely it's tricky. I'm not saying that it's going to be a walk in the park, but what I can tell you, because we already have a couple of those brands, the more complex the brand is to get into Europe in terms of compliance, packaging, and all of that, the bigger the success. We have a brand in the supplement space that we just launched like 3 months ago. And because they had to go through a lot of filters to get everything approved, now they're pretty much category leader. They are right now close to matching 50% of what they're doing already in the US within 3 to 4 months. That's
Oh,
crazy.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say is if you do the homework, if you go through the suffering and enter European market, some of these categories you're gonna become the leader, especially if you come with listings that have a lot of reputation from the US, like reviews.
And it's not just the reviews that you were saying, right? It's also, for example, mainland China sellers can change packaging so
Exactly.
quickly. They're so, once they get past the initial one or two hurdles, you would think the rest of it becomes 10 times easier. And then once they've mastered that, they just start eating to the market share.
Correct.
The advantage for European sellers and UK-based sellers, of course, is that right now they're not investing as much in the US market. And so those resources can be dedicated towards doubling down in their home markets, right?
Yeah, that's another thing that is actually a very good point that you bring forward. Is like a lot of brands actually the reason why we have to do Europe as a backup plan is because a lot of them had a ton of containers that were ready to go, and now with increasing tariffs, if we had to pay the increasing tariff, that would pretty much bankrupt some of these businesses, right? So what we're trying to do is divert some of this inventory to other markets to get some cash flow inside the business in the shape of revenue, at least to get some of the money back and be able to sustain the momentum of keeping the business going, because some of these businesses, as I said, they cannot just increase significantly the price on the customer. If they do that, they're gonna lose a ton of customers. So they're trying to diversify to markets such as even UAE, we're expanding market, Amazon Australia, Amazon Japan is super, super interesting as well. So what I'm trying to say, try
Yeah.
to start looking to these other markets because it's not even up from the point of diversification, it's also from the point of opportunity cost. I have seen this case so many times. Sometimes brands in the US get fixated on getting that increment on 5-10% of what they're already doing in revenue, sometimes that is going to cost you to achieve in the US, given how expensive it's getting advertising. You might as well use those resources to launch in a new country altogether, and that might make you even more profit than try to increase, that 5 extra 10% of revenue in the US. So try to stop being so fixated in the US, and the brands I see now doing the best are the ones that are really spreading their wings into international markets.
Yeah. So many marketplaces are going to be disrupted. I think Japan is the best example of the underutilized,
Yeah.
but large marketplace in the entire Amazon ecosystem. Japan has always been the
Yeah.
market where there was the most opportunity and the fewest people who wanted to do it, I guess, even after Europe. But it's interesting, like we were at the Seller Kingdom conference in Seoul, like 6 months ago, last fall. Most of the sellers we talked to in Korea, South Korea, are selling in the US. That's their primary market.
That's true.
So entire industries, right? Skincare, health and beauty products are going to have to reconstitute themselves. And then that's just one example. Imagine what's going to happen in things like toys. All of these industries eventually will be impacted if their major marketplace was the United States. And the tariffs aren't short term. This is going to last for a while.
Agree.
So
Agree.
yeah, what kind of planning do you see people doing, not just for this year, but for future years in terms of UK and Europe? A lot of people just didn't think about it. I talked to a lot of sellers that have accounts in those regions and they don't use them. So now they're going to start using them.
Yeah. So I would say another thing that you have to consider when expanding to these international markets is that not only you're going to have the opportunity to, of course, diversify your risk, but it's also the opportunity to potentially expand your current offering as a brand altogether. So let me give you a very quick example. We had this specific brand that they were selling a products for a kitchen, right? Like accessories for cooking. And what we figured out with this brand is that they were only purely focused in the US market. And now we expanded to Italy, France, Spain, the UK, and the main ones. And then what we found is that given the expansion that we did into these countries, we figured out that the kitchen in all these, the cuisine in each of these countries is different. In different items for cooking things that have to do with Italian dishes or French or German, even British kind of dishes. So what we encountered is that now they're able to expand the current kitchen brand to accessories that they never thought that was even possible. And they piggyback on the brand that they already had in the US. And because of that, they managed to increase their revenue like 3x because of that, right? So what I'm trying to say, don't only see Europe as a contingency kind of plan, also see it for an opportunity to tap into audiences that they have never seen your product. They're going to give you insights that you never even thought of when it comes to your category. And you can reverse engineer that to come up with new products to launch to the market. Now, to answer your question and then move on to the next points, like I would say the way you have to see this moving forward is right now we're in April. And usually I give myself, when it comes to getting everything set up in Europe, at least 6 months in terms of documentation, VAT, and all of that. So I would say you still have time to maximize a Q4, right? Which is effectively where most of the revenue for a lot of sellers is done. So really now, if you're looking to figure out how I'm going to save 2025 to make sure it's not going to be as a bad year that it could potentially be for a lot of sellers that are not going to take action, is definitely start taking action to expand to Europe. Even if it's only the main two, which is UK and Germany, start with those two. There's plenty already of advantage you're going to have over your competition. And I would say if you give yourself 6 months and work with the right providers, trust me, it's going to be plenty of time. And then from there, that's going to allow you to create that trampoline to then expand to the other European countries, potentially Middle East, and so on.
I went to an Amazon event I think it was in Seattle, maybe 2021, 2022, a few years ago. And they were really pushing global selling back then. They were really trying to get US sellers into UK and Europe, which it didn't work out that well. They kind of did it for a year and no one was doing it. And then they got away from it. Now, other forces, government forces, have pushed people into doing it and accomplishing what Amazon wasn't able to encourage people to do. But it shouldn't be that much of a debate because the UK has one of the world's biggest economies. Germany has one of the world's biggest economies. And these are some of the largest marketplaces on Amazon, just like Japan is, So there were always opportunities there. It's just funny that now people are more interested in investing in those because they're not just tunnel vision on the US. So I actually think it's kind of a good thing. It's not good that they were pushed into it by tariffs, but it's kind of like the silver lining is that now they're finally exploring all these other channels and avenues, because in the long run, you're going to want access to all these other marketplaces.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I was also having a conversation with some aggregators and investors in the space, like definitely having also this international expansion is a thing that's going to benefit you for down the line having an exit,
Mm.
right? So the more markets that you have in terms of where the revenue is coming from, that's usually an added value because that means your risk is diversified across multiple channels. You also have a penetration in different kind of audiences. So that's something investors are looking for. Therefore, don't only see this, as I say, as a defensive and kind of a reactive strategy. It's also for future-proofing your business for an
Yeah.
exit. All the businesses that have help when it comes to exit, their biggest multiples were always when they had an international expansion already set up, right? So also see it from that perspective as well, especially because after talking to a lot of people in Prosper, like aggregators and any advisors, I definitely think that towards the end of the year, next year, is going to be the year where multiples are going to be much more attractive and more money is going to come into the space. So doing European expansion now can also set your business for a bigger exit down the
Oh,
line.
for sure. I think some of those brands just expected their buyer to do all that for them.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, exactly.
and they didn't want to deal with the regulatory issues. Some sellers were afraid to expand into some of these marketplaces because they were afraid that they would get an account suspension for making a
Yeah, I
mistake,
know.
and then the ripple effect would end up hurting their US business. And I can understand that. But obviously, it's like anything else. If you do it properly, you minimize the risk of a suspension.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which you're the expert when it comes to that. At the end of the day, is something that if you work with the right people like yourself, you can fix it. It's not the end of the world. So I think it's just understanding that everything has a process and everything can eventually be figured out and just attack one thing at a time. I think that's the issue, to be honest with you. People think that all these things have to be done all at once, and that's why they get overwhelmed and they don't do it. Do one thing at a time. Make sure your account is in good state, figure out VAT, then figure out shipping inventory, figure out the packaging on the go. So it's like, you can figure things step by step. You don't have to figure out the whole European expansion on 1 week, which is something that's not going to allow you to move forward
Yeah,
for sure.
don't bite off more than you can chew. That's the best advice.
Yeah.
People are more interested in
Yeah.
compliance in these other marketplaces now
Yeah,
because they have been getting into trouble. You're more likely to get your US account suspended if you mess up in
exactly.
another marketplace. And in
Exactly.
the past, it was very separate, but with the advent of global selling, you're more likely to have a problem in one marketplace impact your other marketplaces. So that's the
Yeah.
other good news, is people are more interested in compliance. But honestly, if you're going to sell certain kinds of products that require compliance documentation or certified testing or whatever, you should be interested in compliance from the beginning, not later.
Yeah, that's your priority.
Yeah, I know. So any
Yeah.
last thoughts before we wrap it up? This is kind of a good taste of what you'll be talking about in France in June, but any
So,
parting words of wisdom?
yeah, I would say the last thing as well, which is very important, is before we have any of this conversation in terms of deploying to Europe, the most important thing, guys, is doing the right market research to understand your product is a good fit. I see that mistake done so many times, people expanding from US to Europe, thinking that because they are the best seller in US, they're gonna also have an astonishing success in Europe and encounter themselves. That's usually not the case because the product is not a good market fit due to cultural issues, political issues, weather conditions, so many other things that you might not take in consideration, especially Europe that is so diverse from country to country. It's funny that in the United States, you might travel 3, 4 hours by plane and you still stay in the same country. In Europe, with 1 hour plane, you're a completely different language, different culture altogether. So that's something you have to take in consideration. Like cultures from one country to another impact significantly. And that's also going to impact your selling on Amazon. So take that in consideration. Make sure the market fit is there. And if that's the case, use that as a way to differentiate yourself, localize, and be able to leverage on what you've already been building in the US.
Yeah, and the sellers who do it right will stick out against all the other US or other country-based sellers that do it wrong, because their A plus content won't be good for that audience. They'll make other mistakes with whatever images, any kind of brand representation, and those brands will fail and you'll succeed. If you do it right, there's opportunity to compete better against European sellers, but also against other American sellers who don't do it properly.
That's correct. That's correct.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you next month in London, and then after that in France. We'll have all the info on that. And we'll have the title of your talk too in with this video, in with the
Yeah.
podcast. So thanks again,
Thank you, Chris.
Vincenzo.
Looking forward.